Welcome to the Rediscover You in Midlife Pod Summit, hosted by The Roller Coaster. My name is Lucy Q. 5 years ago, the emotional turmoil of midlife turned my life into a shitstorm. To make things worse, I had no idea that my chaotic emotions were due to the roller coaster of midlife. I thought I was crazy, and I felt completely alone. I've come to realize that midlife is more than a list of symptoms that we have to endure or cure. Midlife is the beginning of our next chapters. This is our time to be heard, to live our best lives, and to fix those pesky hormones. Join me as I chat with experts and industry leaders about nutrition, bone health, hormones, mindset, healing, journaling, living life to the fullest, and yes, even sex. I'm inviting you to throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride. Welcome back to the Rediscover You in Midlife Pod Summit. I'm your host, Lucy Q, and joining me is Alison Bladh. Alison is a registered nutritional and beauty therapist living in the wilds of Sweden after falling for the charms of a Viking man. Alison has worked in the health and wellness industry for over 30 years and specializes in menopausal women's health. She has her own online clinic helping women worldwide to manage the negative symptoms of menopause. Her mission is to support her clients through changes to diet, health, mindset, and lifestyle so that they can harness their hormones and get their confidence and sparkle back. Alison believes that all women, no matter what age, deserve to reclaim their health and feel great. Because after all, life is too short to suffer symptoms that hold you back. Welcome back, Alison.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. It's lovely to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
And I say welcome back because we've actually had to do a take two on this because somehow after our first recording, the files were corrupt and they couldn't be saved. And I really didn't want our audience to miss out on this conversation because, you know, I've come to have a greater understanding just how important nutrition is when it comes to midlife. And, you know, when I look over things, I suddenly realized that I was in the throes of midlife and my hormones were all over the place before really understanding what was going on. And I also learned that a lot of the things that I had been doing, they just no longer worked. And so, you know, on top of all the changes, all the not feeling like yourself, all your sort of go-tos from before, they're just not working anymore. So that sort of adds to the layer of chaos and uncertainty. So maybe, Alison, you could start by sharing, you know, what you went through in midlife and how potentially that's influenced how you serve your customers now.
Yeah, it's so true, Lucy. It's you know, you really have to look after yourself a bit more. You know, what happens when we come into perimenopause, which is the first stage of menopause, you can't behave or you can't get away with what you did when you were younger. You know, maybe, you know, less sleep or, you know, you were out later or things that you were eating. You just can't do it when you get into menopause because you will feel terrible. And what I experienced, I mean, I'm in perimenopause myself now, that for me, my main symptoms were or are like brain fog, lack of concentration, you know, forgetting things. That really is what I've struggled with. And, you know, approaching perimenopause and looking after yourself and thinking about what you eat, you know, really helps to minimise the number of symptoms that you get. It's all very individual. We're very individual as women, and some women just sail through menopause and don't really have any symptoms, and some women really, really suffer. But if you really get your nutrition and lifestyle and mindset in place, even before you come into perimenopause, you know, the experience of this transition can be a lot easier. And for myself, I know when I was growing up and I saw my mother and grandmother and, you know, the females in my family, they really suffered. And, you know, in that time, it wasn't spoken about at all. menopause was, oh no, we don't talk about that. That's you just get on with it. It was called the change. And my poor mother was having hot flushes and feeling terrible, but she didn't have anyone to talk to about it. So that really made me determined when I started working with hormonal health and women's menopausal health, to really support these women, because it doesn't have to be that way. That there is help out there, and you can feel fabulous.
The mindset component to this, I almost feel like it's a new layer to it. I think back to, even when I've tried to talk to my mom about menopause, she had a hysterectomy in her early 40s, so she didn't really experience menopause and go through the whole menopause the same way that perhaps I'm experiencing it. But it was that attitude of, yeah, I have these things going on. I went to the doctor, I got some hormones, and you just get on with it. But I think, again, that comes from, that British heritage where it's just, soldier on. That's just how you do things.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was absolutely no conversation about the mindset and how many of us women, we sort of do this deep dive, or you're sort of drawn into this deep dive of who you are, what you want, and you're questioning all these different things in your life. Are you finding with the women that you're speaking to that that's becoming more of a hot topic than maybe it was before?
Yeah, I really think that the whole, I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, Lucy, but in Europe, there's a bit of a menopause revolution going on. And it's really come out into the forefront, and there's a lot of celebrities behind it. There's a lot of governments. The British government is really getting behind it, and saying there has to be a menopause criteria in companies where they have to look after their female employers, and a big part of that is mindset, and how we look at it and how we embrace this time in our lives, because it's a totally natural process. It's not a disease. And if you can try to embrace this transition with a positive attitude, your experience will be much better. It's very easy to be all doom and gloom and, this is terrible. But, if we approach it with a more positive attitude, it's easier for us to go through this transition.
I'm going to say, in my experience and what I'm seeing going on in North America, no, I do not feel that women are supported. I've seen hints of the discussion of menopause coming up in certain shows. There are small references to it, but by no means is the government, is this even on the government's radar. Certainly in Canada, we are in a health crisis in the sense where having a family doctor is a challenge. I haven't had a family doctor in over 8 years. So, that also plays into it a lot. As for companies having policies, that's the first I've heard of it. I could be wrong, but I have not heard of any other companies, really bringing that to the forefront, because I'm fortunate. I work from home, and I have done for a while. I could not even begin to imagine having to go through what I'm going through. Get up in the morning, get ready for work, drive into the office, deal with being in the office environment all day, and then driving home. I don't think I would be able to hold a job, to be perfectly honest. So congratulations to Europe on bringing that to the forefront.
I mean, there's still, it's in the early stages, but you can see the momentum building up. That you see there's companies that employ a lot of people. Well, not just that, smaller companies as well. They've realised that this is something that they need to do, but because the workforce of these women that are going into perimenopause, it's a big part of the workforce, and these women are very experienced and fantastic at their jobs, so they don't want to lose them. That's a big chunk of the population that would be lost if they don't get the support, because some women have such terrible symptoms that they feel that they can't work. So I mean, it's no, it's difficult, isn't it? But I think that a lot of the bigger companies now, they've got like a team that work there, and if you need to talk to someone, or you feel that you need support because of your menopause symptoms, then you can go and talk to somebody in the HR department, and they have a proper you know menopausal program in place. So, but like I say, it's in the early stages, but it's very positive that this is coming to people are talking about it. That's what it takes. It takes, there were a few celebrities that did documentaries on the television that were specifically talking about menopause and perimenopause, and then it became in the public eye, and women started saying, hold on a minute, I want this support, and I shouldn't be feeling terrible, and going to their doctors and saying, I'm not settling for just go home. I want to do this myself. So there's been a lot of television programs and documentaries on, especially in the UK, with celebrities behind them, and this has really helped to get the menopausal word out there. Talking about HRT, talking about lifestyle modifications and nutrition, really everything, and you can really see how women were craving information. Because since all these documentaries, women have become, hold on a minute, I actually want that support. And I know that when they've been going to their doctors, they haven't been settling for that. Oh, it's just the menopause, go away and get on with it. They sit there and say, well, hold on a minute, I've got all these symptoms, I want help. So I think women have become very empowered and won't take no for an answer, which is great to see.
I was finally able to start my journaling practice back in 2018, but that was only after several failed attempts. Before I was really able to connect with journaling, I had purchased countless blank journals with high hopes of pouring myself onto their pages. Instead of spilling my words of wisdom and insight, I'd find myself sitting there just staring at blank pages, painfully trying to find something to write. That is why I created Your Journaling Journey, a quick start guide to begin your journaling practice today. Your Journaling Journey is a guided journal with daily prompts, gratitude, and affirmations. You can get your copy of Your Journaling Journey today on Amazon, or check out the show notes for links.
It's a hard enough time as it is, isn't it, without feeling that you're on your own. I think women, when I think of my girlfriends and friends and colleagues, we're very supportive towards each other. I feel that, we kind of, when we're together and we're going through this, we can talk to each other and talk how we're feeling, which is really important. I think, that contact with your girlfriends is crucial. But as far as getting support from, the healthcare professionals, it can be, not all of them, but it can be quite tricky.
It is, and I've seen a reference to the BBC documentary about menopause and this story behind it, and when it was originally pitched, the BBC came back and said, well, nobody wants to watch a documentary on that. Fast forward 2 years, it was eventually made, and I think within the first night, it was over 1 million people were watching it. So it definitely speaks to how, we're all craving information at this time. And I think most importantly, we're craving to be heard.
No, that's so true. And that there has been so many advances, especially when you're talking about hormone replacement therapy. We can't compare what women were taking, 20, 30 years ago to what they're using now. It's a completely different thing. It's sourced from, completely different. The majority of the hormone replacement therapy now comes from yams, the body identical, which is a totally natural thing. So that's great. Whereas years ago it was taken from the urine of pregnant mares, so pregnant horses. So there's been so many changes, but there is certainly not enough research. There needs to be more research, and there needs to be more research done on women. The research is predominantly done on men. So in all aspects, not just menopause, we need to do more research on females.
It is, because I think the information for doctors is changing so much. And, there was a point in time, certainly in Canada, where they were completely against prescribing HRT. Now they're starting to get back into it again. But I think a lot of that depends on the research that's available for the doctor and the doctor's availability to actually be able to understand that information. Because again, our doctors are so overloaded. Your GP can't keep up with, what's changing every 5 minutes. And I think ultimately it's up to the individual to have a better understanding of how their body is working and what is, available to them, and to educate and to arm themselves. And one of the things that was, new to me in the last few years was actually the term perimenopause. I had never heard of it before. I'd heard of menopause, but my understanding of what menopause was is different than what I'm hearing now. Can you maybe break down the difference between perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, just so that our listeners can have that initial point where to gauge where they perhaps are in their journey?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question, because there's a lot of people that don't really understand what perimenopause is. Basically, when we talk about menopause, there's 3 different stages, and they really come under what we call the menopause transition. The first stage is perimenopause, and that, on average, it varies considerably because we're all very different, but that starts at the age of 45, and that can go on, it can go on for longer, but normally roughly to around the age of 51. And perimenopause is where your hormones start to fluctuate. Things start to become a bit unbalanced. You're still ovulating, you can still get pregnant, but the hormones are starting to just misbehave a little, and this can trigger off all the symptoms, like the hot flashes, weight gain, headaches, the big list of different symptoms. So perimenopause, it's kind of, estrogen levels can become quite high, and progesterone levels become a bit low. So at certain times of the month, I always like to say, estrogen's like the diva hormone, and progesterone's like the calming best friend. So what kind of happens is, as your estrogen levels rise, and you haven't got that like buffer, you haven't got the best friend there to say, hold on a minute, calm down. And that can like stimulate all these, irritability, mood swings. So it's a bit like a roller coaster, your hormones through perimenopause. And then what happens is, you will gradually, as you go through perimenopause, your hormone levels will start to decline. And when you haven't had a period for a year, so a whole year, you're then in menopause. So I like to say, when you're coming to the end of perimenopause, you're kind of in, you're in the waiting room there, just waiting to go into menopause, and when you haven't ovulated for a year. And then you're in menopause, and that basically means that you're not fertile anymore, you won't have any periods, and all the time after that is postmenopause. So if you really think about menopause, it isn't a particularly long time. It's just that period in time when you haven't menstruated for a year. And then you go into postmenopause, and postmenopause is, it's all the time that you have left, which can be 30 plus years, to live your life and have a wonderful time. But you're not, you're not fertile anymore. You're not producing, you're not ovulating. You're not having periods, and your estrogen levels really decline then. Your body does produce a small amount of estrogen from your adrenal glands, but the estrogen levels do become a lot lower, and progesterone as well. So they're really the 3 different phases.
And it's my understanding that the main culprit to all of the symptoms, everything that we're experiencing rather, the main culprit is our hormones. So then bringing balance to our hormones seems to be for me, it's this thing that I keep chasing, but I just can't seem to figure out. And I've learned a few things here and there. And again, there's no one prescription for any one person to take that's going to work for everybody. What works for me isn't going to work for you because my body is different. And I think that just adds to the confusion of trying to figure this all out. But it's my understanding that nutrition, and I don't want to say diet, but what we're eating is the main thing to look at. Is that correct?
It is, but also there are some very key lifestyle modifications that you need to look at. One in particular is stress. Going back to hormones, you've got estrogen, you've got progesterone, testosterone, but the stress hormones can be really detrimental on your health. And they just kind of lead this cycle of negativity. When you've got high levels of cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones, you will find it very difficult to lose weight. You may have problems with blood sugar, raised blood sugar levels. So it's all kind of a knock-on effect. So stress management, getting the nutrition in place, and the mindset, you really need to work on all those areas. And if that is what you want to look at and it works for you, HRT. You've got to really do all these pieces to get the whole puzzle sorted out. It's not enough to just do one of them. Obviously, it will help if you change your nutrition, but if you're very, very stressed, even that you're eating healthily, you still will, you won't be feeling great if you're suffering from chronic stress.
And when it comes to nutrition, are there certain things that we should be focusing on, things that we should be eating more of, or things that we should be looking at excluding from what we're eating?
The main thing really as we come into perimenopause is that you really need to be thinking about, one, the quality of the food that you're eating, and two, to remove processed refined foods from your diet. So all the very heavily refined, that have a high sugar content, they have hydrogenated fats, possibly trans fats, and these have been shown in studies. If you eat these sort of foods, the frequency, especially hot flashes, will be more frequent. They're in a way they're toxic, these foods. The majority of them don't contain any nutrition because they've been so highly refined that they don't give us the nutrients that we need. And if you look on the back of a package of a refined product, it can have sometimes like 20, 30 different ingredients, and half of the ingredients there you don't even know what they are. It's I say to my clients, if you don't know what an ingredient is, then you shouldn't really be buying it. Just try to buy whole food. When you look at a piece of broccoli, that is a piece of broccoli. It doesn't have a list of ingredients. A chicken is a chicken. It really doesn't have to be complicated to eat whole foods, real foods. You look at it and you know what it is.
Now, the next component you mentioned was mindset. What are some of the things that you discuss with the women you work with when it comes to mindset?
Yeah, I really try to get people to get out of that negative spiral. And, you can, and I know it can be really tough. So I'm not saying that you can just suddenly snap out of that negative spiral. But really try to change your mindset and think positively. Because also it's just fascinating how even research shows that if someone has a more positive attitude, then the symptoms will be less. Whereas if you're sat there the whole time, really thinking, when am I going to have my next hot flash, or I feel terrible, you kind of get caught up in this world of negativity. So I really try to work with clients and change the way that they think about this, really try to empower them to think that this is a transition that I'm going through. And I am an amazing woman. Every woman will be going through this. And try to have fun and do things in your life that make you laugh and go out there and be wild and crazy. I think it's fabulous when you see it. I know a lot of women that are in post-menopause. They start their own businesses. They go out and do things that they never would have done before. Whatever you want to do, this is the time to do it, because as we get older, we hopefully as women have more time for ourselves. Maybe the children have left home. When you've retired, it's time to do all those amazing things that you wanted to do, and that puts your mindset. That gives you a positive mindset if you do things to really stimulate yourself.
Because it's really in midlife is, if you're a woman that had kids, it's at that midlife point that you reach that those kids are older. They've either moved out or they're moving out. They're moving on with their lives. And that's when you start to feel that gap. And I think it's that gap is where the fear creeps in. And that's where we get caught on that negative downward spiral, is because we're looking at the things that we are losing. And, a friend of mine is a life coach, and she wrote something about we have to acknowledge our feelings, and it's okay to feel our loss. Even though our kids are gaining, they're moving on with their lives and they're spreading their wings. There's nothing wrong with us feeling those emotions and sitting with those emotions of, I've lost my child as I knew them, that they're now moving on, they're moving out of my house. So it's acknowledging our own feelings in the moment, but also realizing that midlife, it's an ending to one thing, but it's the beginning of something else. And I think that's the part that we're starting to realize is the gold for us, is realizing that midlife is about writing what we want in our next chapter. And that's where you see women starting their own businesses and doing all of these things that they would never have dreamed of doing.
Yeah, exactly, Lucy. That's so well said. It's a new beginning, isn't it? It's a different chapter. Life has many different chapters, and it's a new beginning, a different chapter in life. And all the stages of life have their positive and negative aspects, but we only have one life, don't we? We need to embrace it and live it to the full.
And it's funny, throughout our conversation, we were talking about stress and nutrition and mindset, and I spent the last 10 days putting the summit together, and it's very ironic, but I completely forgot about all of these things that we've been talking about while putting the summit together, because I put all of these deadlines on myself. I self-imposed all of this stress, and I set aside my self-care routine. I set aside all of those things that I knew keep me healthy, and I was shocked at how quickly I started to spiral down. And it was horrible. And it was such a hard lesson to learn. It was one that I obviously had to learn, and that's why it was dished up to me. But I was shocked at how quickly I started to spiral down, and I knew what was going on. And it took me a few days to fully pull on that brake and be able to pull myself back out. And now I'm, not only have I restored my self-care routine, now I am going even further into everything from what I've learned through speaking to the different industry leaders and experts throughout the summit. Is I've taken those lessons and I've started to implement them in my lives, because even though I thought I was doing a lot of good things before, I realized that there was a room to do much, much better. And that's what I'm doing now. And slowly I'm starting to see improvements in certain areas. For one, it's sleep. I'm still not at that sweet spot with sleep by any stretch of the imagination, but I see a light.
Yeah. And it's so, I mean, isn't it interesting how, what you were saying, Lucy, that over a relatively short period of time, not looking after yourself because you're so busy, that how that makes you feel. I agree with you totally. If I've had a really busy week at work and, maybe haven't had time for as much self-care that is what you would normally do, you definitely feel it, totally. I mean, it's quite amazing how quickly that can catch up with you. But I mean, it's being mindful of it, isn't it? And understanding, like you were saying, you knew that you should have been doing more self-care, but because you were so busy, you didn't. So once you've got that, that's really positive, because you will put the brakes on and say, hold on a minute, my health is my priority and I need to look after myself. Otherwise, I'm going to become ill.
Definitely. And for me, my illness typically manifests mentally. Yeah. I was quickly falling into a depression. And that's not a place where you want to go if you can help it. So, like I said, it was a hard lesson to learn, but obviously a very important one. And I always feel it's important to share these things because, it goes to show that, no matter how far we go, how much we learn, how much we grow, there's always room to sort of learn again and to redo things again and to take a different look and take a different spin on things, just to see where we can improve and make things better for ourselves. Because ultimately, when you feel better, when you're feeling more like yourself, everything else becomes a lot easier, especially when it comes to dealing with regular stress levels.
Yeah. And I mean, the human body is amazing. So if you give it the right nutrition and you look after it and you have a healthy lifestyle, the body will thrive. It wants to be thriving. It's just all the things that we do that get in the way of that. So eating nutritious foods, feeding the body what it needs, and having a healthy lifestyle, and your body will thrive. That's what it's craving.
And definitely the importance of, I don't know who said that we have to be going 24/7, but just being okay with wrapping yourself in a blanket, picking up a book and, just reading for an afternoon. It's those simple things that, in the long run can mean so much more.
I think it's getting better though, isn't it? But I know when I was growing up, it was very much of the society that it was thought of as you were really good if you only slept 5 hours a night. I'm working, I don't need much sleep, I'm really focused on my job. It was kind of in a way thought of as being positive, because you could get
it was almost an accolade that people were chasing. Yeah. And that whole, grind, I can sleep when I'm dead. Well, you keep grinding, you're going to be dead a hell of a lot sooner.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's kind of changing now. I think people have started to realise that how crucial sleep is. I really see that with my clients over the years. Many years ago, it was very difficult to say to a client, well, it would be great if you could sleep 7 to 8 hours, and they'd be like, that's not happening. I haven't got time for that. Whereas now, people are quite open to that. They realise how important sleep is for everything.
And there's all sorts of aids to help people sleep. I mean, whether it's cooling sheets, cooling mattresses, special eye masks, white noise machines, weighted blankets. So obviously somebody's realizing somewhere that we need to put more focus on sleep if they're creating all of these products to make sure that we can sleep as best as we can. Yeah.
I mean, it's just so many processes that happen in the body if we're not sleeping enough. I mean, it's like a cascade of things that happen in the body negatively, and one of those being that the day after, you'll find that your menopausal symptoms will probably be worse. You'll crave carbohydrates. You'll be anxious. Sleep is crucial, and I totally appreciate that it can be difficult for people going through perimenopause and menopause, again because of the hormone fluctuations. So it's something that you certainly need to work on and get in place a sleep hygiene routine that works for you, that's realistic. Really, like maybe not looking on social media. Roughly an hour before you go to bed, you should really try to get away from, all computers, televisions, and just, like you were saying, sit and read. Just like calm down, wind down. If you go to bed when you've just finished work, your body's still awake. You really need to wind down. A lovely thing that I like to do is have a nice cup of chamomile tea, or one of the very soothing teas, read a book, maybe just have a chat with your family members. But just that winding down phase is really important, because then when you go to bed, you're relaxed, and you need to produce the melatonin sleep hormone, which tells your body now it's time to go to bed. But if you're charged up and you're doing loads of things and maybe a bit stressed, it's difficult to go to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, you have to allow your body the time that it needs to shift from, focus working to now it's time to sleep.
Mm. Yeah, totally.
Now, Alison, you have prepared a lovely gift for our listeners. I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about what you have.
Yes, I've put together, to give you some ideas of what you should or could be eating during menopause. I've put together 2 ebooks. One is plant-based and one is not. And they're basically got meal plans and recipe suggestions. And it's an idea of, the sort of things that are beneficial for perimenopause and menopausal ladies. The nutrients that you need to concentrate on. For example, calcium is very important for our bone health. We really need to look at heart health. We need to look at all the lovely healthy fats. So it's getting all that together in a nice meal plan with recipes to help you get you going really on your nutritional journey during this time period.
I'm definitely going to take a look at that, because I think one of the questions I hate the most is, what's for dinner? So anytime I have a suggestion on trying something new, definitely I'm going to try that. So I'm definitely going to be downloading the plant-based recipe book for that. So for our listeners, for you to get your copy of Nutrition for Happy Menopause, the recipe ebook, make sure you go to nectargrowth.com. That's NECTUREGROWTH. And this is an amazing community, and it's actually completely away from social media. It has all kinds of resources, which we're going to be adding to every month. And we are also going to be hosting our fireside chats. Now, this is where you get to join in conversation with women just like you, where we get to share what's going on, share different ideas and suggestions. And yes, even when we need to, we are going to vent. So make sure you join us at nectargrowth.com. You can find the links in the show notes and in your daily Pod Summit emails. And thank you for joining us today. And Alison, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. It's a pleasure. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creator.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Roller coaster. Ride, ride.